Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Armchair Armdrager podcast. This is episode number 44. As always, I am your host, Ben Hersick. And as you can see by the title, we're talking about the issues that NXT faces. I did this back with AEW a while ago, and the issues they have are still there. I mean, literally after Moxley won the title, there were people on social media saying, who's really left there for Moxley to challenge? But that's a whole nother story. That's over in that episode. Go watch it, listen to it, whatever you want to do. But before we get started with the NXT version, a few things, how we always start off these episodes. You can follow myself on Twitter at Chiro Soldier. You can follow this podcast at Podcast Armchair. Follow All Things Combat over on Twitter at Things Combat, where we cover professional wrestling, boxing, and MMA. My breaking down, predicting of WXW's 16 Carat Gold tournament, which is going on right now, came out early this morning for me, like 3 a.m. early. They operate in the UK, so that's like early morning-ish for them. Like 7 or 8, I think, off the top of my head. And we also have the merch store. That'll all be linked in the description below. You can read the 16 Karat Gold with the link in the description below. And you can also follow the Cauldron at CSU on Twitter at CSU Cauldron, where I'm the sports editor at. My article from last week, my 2 articles from last week, actually, will be linked in the description below as well. And also, my first piece for Vocal got posted. I actually get paid per view on this one. So if you click the link that says something about Fire Emblem in the title in the description, that will send you over there. And they'll see like, oh, he got another click. There's another half a cent or something. It's not much, but whatever you guys want to do, and if you click on that, it helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance for that. Okay, let's get to NXT. So the way I kind of did this in my head, I kind of want to go division by division and talk about the strengths and the weaknesses that all 4 have. Because we're going to go main event scene, mid-card, tag team, and women's. There's a reason I have women's last. And there's a reason I have main event first. And I'll look at the positives and negatives and everything in between. Talk about certain things that are happening. So, where do we want to start? How do I want to start this off with the main event scene? So, you look at the main event scene in NXT. You have Adam Cole, Velveteen Dream, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano. Do you include Finn Balor and Walter in that category? Balor hasn't main evented a takeover yet. Granted, he's been back for just one actual takeover event. And he hasn't. And Walter is kind of over in the NXT UK, so I don't know if he necessarily counts in this category. But also, let's look at just those 4 right there. Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, and Velveteen Dream. Those are 4 of the best wrestlers in the world today, and maybe the best character in wrestling in Velveteen Dream. But let's also talk about the fact that there's only 4 people in the main event scene for NXT. That's a bit of an issue, especially with the fact that at least 2 of them, I think, are going to be moving to the main roster after, well, quote-unquote main roster, after WrestleMania. But also, we've been seeing those little weird videos backstage, or where it was like a bird, and then there's a street sign, and then there was like a couple other things mixed in there. That's possibly Killer Cross. I didn't watch NXT. I didn't hear any spoken words, so I'm a little out of the loop on that. But also, you look at just the general structure of NXT, they have some guys who can get pushed to the main event scene pretty easily in Keith Lee, Dominic Dijakovic. Maybe you throw Austin Theory in there towards the end of next year. You also can say Damian Priest. Pete Dunne and Matt Riddle are obviously guys that are already there. But the fact that they don't really give those guys... It's hard to say they don't give them screen time, because all the names I mentioned were at least mentioned on TV. At the very least, they were mentioned on TV last week. Keith Lee was on screen. Austin Theory had a match. Priest and Dijakovic got name dropped. Riddle and Dunn were there for a little bit. So like they have the talent to pretty much restock that main event scene. But the question of who gets that positioning is more important because of the fact that there's so few spots to go around. So who really is going to be the next main event heel once Adam Cole leaves? Who really will be the next main event face if Tommaso Ciampa is the guy that leads NXT instead of Johnny Gargano? That's going to be something very interesting to see and interesting to watch. And there's also the names of the Performance Center that nobody's talking about. I don't have a list in front of me of people at the PC, but there are guys and girls there that are ready for NXT. They just haven't been on TV yet. So getting to that point for them is going to be very, very crucial because they need to be able to restock. Now, if you make NXT essentially the third brand and people can go up to Raw or SmackDown and come back to NXT and it's just seen as a transition over, that's totally fine by me. If you make NXT a third brand and you have it get guys who are on the main roster doing nothing, like a Shinsuke Nakamura, a Kevin Owens after WrestleMania, guys and girls of that caliber, where they're like on the main roster, they're not main event seen necessarily, but we know how good they are. And for the love of God, please get Apollo Crews back in NXT. And there's also another thing I'm going to talk about at the very end after the women's division, which I kind of saved, because it's something that doesn't really get touched on a lot, and I kind of want to talk about it and give it its own little thing. But let's also look at the mid-card scene. The mid-card is it's a bit of a tough thing to say what its state is. It's also weird because, in a way, there are two mid-card titles. I'm counting the cruiserweight in that category because a lot of the guys in the mid-card are at that 205 and under weight limit. Look at Isaiah Scott. Look at Angel Garza, Leo Rush. I think Cameron Grimes is, I want to say off the top of my head, he was like 202 last I checked. And there's a bunch more that I'm probably forgetting. But what's very important to think about is the fact that Leo Rush lost the Cruiserweight title to Angel Garza. He got a match against Jordan Devlin, lost that. And we haven't seen him in the past 2 weeks, I believe, roughly. So the fact that we're not seeing him isn't the issue. But he needs to now move on to something else. And that something else needs to be the NXT North American Championship scene. Leo Rush is too good to just sit in a cruiserweight division for his entire career. He's a lot like a Rey Mysterio-esque wrestler, where you know just how good he is, and you can't just define him by a weight class. He is somebody that should be going against the best of the best, regardless of if they're 250 pounds and he's 160. Let him go, let him do his thing, he will be good. But you also look at it with how much talent is there in that mid-card scene. My God, NXT is kind of set for the long haul with that mid-card. With Cameron Grimes, some of the guys I already mentioned, Grimes, Lee, Dijakovic, Priest, Isaiah Scott, Austin Theory. You add in like Leo Rush. We don't know where Garza will be after Mania, or even before Mania. We don't know how long his run on Raw is going to be. We'll see if he stays there. If he does, fantastic for him. He's earned that by a country mile. If he comes back to NXT, hopefully he's in the main event scene there. But also, you have the guys who are kind of not struggling for a place, but guys who are just kind of there that you can build up and work on. Like, look at Boa. Boa is not a horrible wrestler. He's not ready to be pushed like a star yet, but give him just a little more seasoning in the ring. There could be something there for a little bit. We'll see. There's a few other guys and girls that are floating around in that mid-card where it's like you don't really know what their like whole thing is. Like, where do they go? Excuse me, I don't know why I'm yawning so much. Where do they go? What do they do? What's really the point of them just being here and ready to wrestle if they're just there? And I want to see a lot more I think the best way to say it, I want to see more meaningful matches for the people who are still a work in progress, for lack of a better term. Guys like Shane Strickland, essentially. Remember Shane Strickland came in like a really highly touted class. I'm forgetting who he signed with. Oh no, it was him, Kushida, and... Was it him, Kushida, and Garza? No, because Garza was in the same class as Humberto. It was Strickland, Kushida, and some third guy. And that's another thing. We haven't seen Kushida a lot recently. So I want to see more of Kushida. If we can get some more of like certain wrestlers and we can actually get invested in them and have a reason to cheer for them, instead of, oh, they're facing typical heel B. Why do we care that they're facing typical heel B? Give us a reason to actually cheer for this person. Killian Dane, somebody I forgot to mention too. We've seen Dane do some stuff. His match with Bronson Reed a few weeks ago was actually really good for two big men. And if you can establish these characters going forward in the mid-card, NXT's mid-card will be set for life, but also work on making the transition to be able to have them be in that main event scene. Work with them so that way, after they have no feud in the mid-card, they have a legitimate reason to be saying, hey, I'm good enough to deserve an NXT championship match. Essentially work with them to make them be that upper echelon wrestler a lot of them have been around the world. But let's look at the tag team division, and that's where there's a very, very glaring issue. There's not a lot of tag teams in NXT. You have Undisputed Era, who's two-time tag team champions. You have Lorcan and Birch, who, as over as they are, they're probably never winning the tag team titles. Sorry, not sorry. You have the Broserweights, which I don't know how long that's going to last. We'll see. I'm enjoying the hell out of it, but I don't know how long it'll last. You have now, I believe, Grizzled Young Veterans are officially NXT and not NXT UK anymore, which is very fun to see. Because while everyone loves Zach Gibson, I'm here and there on him. I don't hate his work, but it's not my favorite. I'm more of a James Drake fan. I want to see more James Drake, and him being in NXT is going to be amazing to see some of these matches he's going to have. But after those four, who's really there? What do you really do? Why should we care about a tag team division that has just four legitimate tag teams, one of which is just two guys thrown together because they needed something to do? Broserweights caught fire, yes, but imagine if they didn't catch fire and they just lost the Undisputed Era. Now what do? They need to. This is the one area that NXT really, really needs to focus on. One of a few areas they really need to focus on, and that is making a tag team division. Because if you look at AEW, the show they go up against every Wednesday night, and the Wednesday Night Wars, and I could care less about a war between two shows. I just want good wrestling. If you look at how AEW does tag team wrestling, it is perfection to a T to the most part. Still don't enjoy that they put the title on two random guys that just thrown together in Kenny and Paige. Well, they have a history, yes, but still, it's like, it's not an established tag team. Why are you tag team champions? And that's the same issue I have with the Broserweight. So it's not just Kenny and Hangman that I have an issue with. But I look at it too. It's like there's, for the guys that don't have any real feud going on in NXT, why not start making some tag teams like Bronson Reed and Shane Thorne? I was trying to who's the member of TM61 that didn't leave. You put Bronson Reed and Shane Thorne together as like an Aussie connection, and then you can throw a few other teams in there with some of the talent that you have, and you have Canadian Tag Team 3.0, I believe they were called. They weren't called Canadian Tag Team 3.0. They're two Canadian wrestlers that were in a tag team, and that team was named 3.0, I believe. It might have been 2.0. No, I think it was 3.0. It's Matt Parker and Jeff something. Don't remember Jeff's last name. But, like, you can start to use them a little bit more and more. Maybe you have them face some local competition here and there, start to build them up a little bit. And then maybe they get some wins over some teams of two guys thrown together for a point of building them up. We'll see exactly where that goes. The tag team issue is the most glaring one that they have, and it's one that I think should be addressed soon. Not sooner, soon. Because after Undisputed Era gets called up, and if the Broserweights lose the tag team titles to Grizzled Young Veterans, there's nobody really for Grizzled Young Veterans to face outside of Lorcan and Birch. Maybe you get Kanellis and Neeson there. Maybe Lee and Dijakovic. I'd rather see Lee in the main event scene after TakeOver Tampa, maybe. Maybe the TakeOver after that in Chicago, or whatever Money in the Bank is this year. We'll see. But that brings us to the NXT Women's Division. And this, I've said this a couple times. I don't remember if I've said this on this podcast. But to me, the NXT Women's Division is the best division in wrestling, bar none. No other division can hold a candle to the NXT Women's Division. When you have names like Rhea Ripley, Shayna Baszler, Bianca Belair, Io Shirai, Candice LeRae, Mia Yim, Tegan Nox, Dakota Kai, and you have somebody like Charlotte Flair win the Women's Royal Rumble and come down to challenge your champion because she sees her as the best as the best champion going today, that says that your division is the best in the world. And I think it's only going to continue to get better and better. With Chelsea Green now being there, Shotzi Blackheart being there. Yes, their match in NXT this week was meh, but can't have 5-star classics every single week on free TV. You also add in the likes of Deonna Purrazzo, who's the performance setter, Mercedes Martinez, Santana Garrett. You have this talent that's there and so good. And I've said this, a combination of Ripley, Shirai, and Belair, I believe are going to get called up after WrestleMania. I don't know where, I don't know to who. Bianca Belair seems like the most obvious one. I see Belair going to Raw, no questions asked. I see Belair going to Raw, getting called up, going to Raw, and beating Charlotte Flair on the first night after Flair loses to Ripley at WrestleMania. My unofficial... I keep, eating water, and it's, way over there, and I see it. But after Charlotte Flair loses to Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, I see Bianca Belair coming out and beating the hell out of Charlotte Flair to establish herself on the main roster. I think that's a hell of a way to debut, and probably not what they're going to do, because it makes too much sense. But still, that's one of the issues with... That's the one thing I can say about NXT's Women's Division. There's no real glaring issue. I see no issues really with the division. Maybe, and now I can kind of talk about the last point I wanted to make, maybe the lack of character work you can say to an extent, but who really knows? That one's really hard to tell because you don't know how much character they want these wrestlers to have. And you look at somebody like Rhea Ripley, her character work has been okay at best for the most part, but she's somebody that doesn't really need that character work. She's a lot like Beth Phoenix in a way, where you just know that she's good. And you're just going to be like, you know what, yeah, we're just going to cheer for her. And people say this about so many wrestlers, and to some I agree. Beth Phoenix is the one women's wrestler I can say this, no matter how many great women's matches there are, there's with women's wrestling, the one wrestler you can always say was in the wrong period of time is Beth Phoenix. She would have thrived in the women's wrestling world today, no matter where she was. She would have been so good. Maybe Victoria, also to an extent. Mickie James was around during the Ruthless Aggression era and had a prominent place on television, so that was good. But yeah, Victoria and Beth Phoenix are two of the women's wrestlers you can say belong in this era. And even Victoria, there's only a couple matches I would really want to see her have in this era. With Beth Phoenix, I want to see her face everybody from this era. Give her Charlotte Flair, give her Sasha Banks, give her Bayley, give her Naomi, give her Bianca Belair, give her Rhea Ripley, give her Kaylee Ray. What the hell? Why not? There's so many matches I would love to see with Beth Phoenix. And Beth is like the perfect example of not needing a character to get over in wrestling. Fans knew when Beth Phoenix was on, they were going to actually get a really good women's division match. And back in those days, they were few and far between. I also just realized people are probably going to be upset I didn't say Melina. Melina is showing she can still go in NWA, so she doesn't count. She is still going to this day. And her stuff has actually been really interesting to watch in NWA Power, and I'm happy that I was able to see some of it. But let's talk about maybe the biggest glaring issue with NXT, and something that was brought to my attention somewhat recently in a conversation I had. With NXT, and more importantly the NXT call-ups, there is a glaring issue. And that issue is character work. Think back to when Sami Zayn got called up. What was Sami Zayn's character? Good wrestler. Okay, that works. When Kevin Owens got called up, what's his gimmick? Good wrestler. And can talk. And is an asshole. Okay, fair. What about Shinsuke Nakamura? Good wrestler. Bobby Roode, good wrestler. Hideo Itami, good wrestler. There's no characters that have really worked in NXT that have gone to the main roster. And yes, you can argue and say, oh, Bayley worked, oh, Becky Lynch worked, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks. A, those are the 4 horsewomen, 4 of the best women's wrestlers of all time. And B, they are in a division small enough that you don't need as much character work as the men's division. The men's division is, I think I did the math at one point, is like twice the size per show. And it's just like, there's no character. Everybody right now is just good wrestler, good wrestler, good wrestler, good wrestler, good wrestler. Where's the character work? Where's an actual character? And why should I invest in you? In NXT, we invest in you because NXT is more like a cult, where we follow you and we support what you do because you're one of us. You're one of the guys or girls that likes wrestling. But when you go to the main roster, you have a wider audience on weekly television, and you have to give them a reason to be invested. If you don't, they're going to flip the channel. And you don't want to be that person that has all the channel flips on their matches. You need to be that wrestler that goes out there and has a character. You can't just be good wrestler number 78. You have to be a good wrestler who has a gimmick. Look at Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan is the prime example of this. Bryan was a good wrestler, and then he started to get into his head that he was the best wrestler. He got egotistical and arrogant, lost at WrestleMania in 18 seconds, was still egotistical and arrogant. And then he had the whole yes movement, and fans got behind him. I'm forgetting Team Hell No, obviously. I'm looking at more of a singles perspective right now for Bryan. He got the whole yes movement, and everyone got behind him and was supporting him, and that's a character working. When he came back and he became the eco-friendly vegan hippie that everybody hated but loved because he was so good in the ring, that's when the character work doesn't need to be as strong. Especially in this most recent face run, his character work hasn't really been the best, to say the least. I've still enjoyed it. I've still thought that it was pretty good. But the fact that he can just be Daniel Bryan at this point in his career and get cheered or booed, that works for him. And I am very excited that works for him. And if NXT can target the whole character thing and actually make interesting characters, there are a couple that are there right now. You look at the likes of Tommaso Ciampa has a really good character. Who else? The new Johnny Gargano character is going to be interesting, at least to see how it goes. Undisputed Era's got a really great character about themselves. Velveteen Dream might be the best example of a great character, where, and I will talk about this on the Takeover Tampa WrestleMania 36 predictions. I still don't think Velveteen should be NXT champion just yet. And if I'm fearful for when he does win the title, and I'll explain that in a couple weeks here. But also, I look at it, Keith Lee has a bit of a character. Dijakovic is starting to get one, but what is everybody else's in NXT? From Dominic Dijakovic on down the card, what is your character? Why should we care? Give us a reason to be invested. And then when you go to the main roster, show that to the wider audience, and they'll be able to understand you and get into you a lot quicker. That's just one Armchair Armdrager's thoughts, but that's how it is. Also, I forgot that there was a wrestling pay-per-view this weekend because they have not advertised it very well. Elimination Chambers this weekend. I'm just going to make quick predictions because right now it's a 6-match show with 2 days before the show. So great. The women's, I'll do that one last. I'll go in reverse order on the card. The United States Championship match, Andrade defending against Humberto Carrillo. I'm going to go with Andrade because I want to see him defend his title in a multi-man ladder match at Mania. And have him be like the one that comes out last, the confident champion, with Zelina looking like Zelina by his side, and go from there. Aleister Black and AJ Styles in a no disqualification match. Aleister Black via Undertaker shenanigans to set up the AJ Styles Undertaker match at Mania. I also said this, I wouldn't mind if like Taker's in the ring, Black doesn't necessarily leave the ring, but he's in a corner, essentially, after having gotten beat down by AJ Styles. After Taker beats up Styles, he turns to Black. Black stands up and just gets in his face, and Taker just nods his head. Not necessarily a WrestleMania challenge, but like just him saying, "You're all right, kid," and essentially a passing of the torch of the quote-unquote spooky wrestler in WWE. Street Profits defending the Raw Tag Team titles against Seth Rollins and Murphy. Street Profits, they just won it. Rollins is going to the feud with Kevin Owens for Mania. Maybe Murphy's in the multi-man U.S. ladder match. We'll see. Elimination Chamber match for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. I'm going to try and read this one without looking at the Wikipedia page for it. You have Miz and Morrison defending against the New Day, Lucha House Party, the Usos, Heavy Machinery, and Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler. This one's maybe the toughest one on the card to predict, which is a shame because it's a really predictable card. Give me Miz and Morrison in that one, and maybe set up Usos, New Day, Miz and Morrison at Mania, and that's how you can get Miz and Morrison to lose and move over to Raw probably. 3-on-1 handicap match for the Intercontinental title. Braun Strowman versus Shinsuke Nakamura versus Sami Zayn versus Cesaro. Strowman versus Nakamura, Cesaro, and Zayn. Excuse me. I say Strowman, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a swerve. Zayn somehow wins the title, and we see a triple threat between Sami Zayn, Cesaro, and Nakamura at Mania. God, imagine how good that match would be if you give it time. And then the Raw Women's Championship. Okay, the Raw Women's Division Elimination Chamber match, where the winner gets a title shot against Becky Lynch at WrestleMania 36. That's a mouthful, and I hate it. It's Natalya versus Liv Morgan versus Asuka versus Ruby Riott versus Sarah Logan versus the winner, Shayna Baszler. I don't care that these reports say that Vince is not bought into Shayna Baszler yet. Give Baszler plenty of time in that chamber. Have her come out as number 3 or number 4, and let her steamroll through everybody. Let her destroy anyone and everyone that tries to stop her. And that's how you get Vince to be bought in. That's simple. But that's going to be it for this week. I've said before, I'm trying to keep these things a little bit shorter. I hope you guys are still enjoying them. And very thankful for whoever keeps listening to these. You can follow myself on Twitter at Churro Soldier. You can follow this podcast at Podcast Armchair. You can follow All Things Combat on Twitter, which is a website that covers professional wrestling, boxing, and MMA. Over on Twitter at Things Combat. We're in the middle of our WrestleMania reviews. My first one is not until WrestleMania 11. That's a long story. I don't really want to get into it. But also breaking down predicting 16 Karat Gold, which is going on right now over in Germany in Westside Extreme Wrestling. That will be linked in the description below. You can follow the Cauldron at Cleveland State on Twitter at CSU Cauldron. I'm the sports editor over there. My article about what I write about. Men's basketball ending their season. And the other one I wrote about, softball starting their season. There we go. That's how my brain works. Those will be linked in the description below. And also my first ever vocal piece about why classes are important in Fire Emblem will be linked in the description as well. That one's a little more important because if you click on it, you make me money. It's not a lot of money, but it's money. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Maybe it'll be Elimination Chamber breakdown and talk about and see what happened. Who knows? If you like what you heard, hit the like button. If you really like what you heard, hit subscribe. Talk to you guys next week about some more pro wrestling.